You're listening to the best of the bravest. Interviews with the FDNY's elite. And the streak lately of FDNY EMS continues. You know, we've been trying to document more of the EMS division. You know how I feel about the EMS division and EMS in general. So plenty of stories to be told by those who worked in an engine company and a truck company in October, November, December. You'll hear those guys too. But there's been a streak of guys that I've been wanting to talk to. And we've been talking to them lately. Bill Gross has been on this program. Mark Peck, who's already in the chat, has been on this program. Mike Grant was just on the program. And tonight, I'll introduce Mitch Stern momentarily. So if you haven't checked out the previous episode, like I said, it was Mike Grant, who I had not under the Best of the Bravest banner, but rather for the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. He was never in NYPD ESU, but he was in Transit's ESU, Emergency Medical Rescue Unit, from 86 to 93. That's why I put him under that banner. That was a great show. And I got a lot of positive feedback off that one. Mike messaged me himself. So that was a fun show. Go back and watch that one. If you haven't, I know tonight will be a fun show. My guest certainly has a lot of stories. If the pictures that he sent me are any indication. So hello to everybody. I mentioned Mark, Christian Williams, Chris Ebden. Of course, he's been on the program before, John Costello and Joe Malika. So very much looking forward to tonight. As always, we will do our ads and then introduce Mr. Stern momentarily. And as always, with the baseball playoffs coming up, it's timely. How about a word from the shop seat? Baseball fans, if you bleed Braves country red and blue, this one's for you. Check out the Chop Seat podcast hosted by Victor Mignetis. Every week, Victor dives deep into all things Atlanta Braves and Major League Baseball, from game recaps and trade rumors to player spotlights and the latest league news. Whether it's breaking down the lineup, debating pitching rotations, or talking postseason chances, the Chop Seat gives you honest takes, sharp analysis, and a fan's true passion for the game. So if you're looking for your go-to Braves and MLB podcast, pull up a chair and join the conversation. Subscribe to the Chop Seat today on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Because in Braves country, there's always room at the Chop Seat. So in a couple of days, the New York Yankees are either going to be a wild card team or they're going to be American League East Division champions. They're playing Baltimore tonight, so we'll see what happens. And Toronto is playing Tampa. But this is not ESPN, rather. This is Mike to New Haven. And before we get to our guest tonight, you know the deal by now. If you need a PI, come on, don't go to anybody else. Go to Bill Ryan. The Mike to New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the Elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson and Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike to New Haven podcast. The alternate title to this episode, according to Mark Peck in the chat, and now Jaws 3, Bruce's Revenge. With that said, my next guest is one of the most accomplished and experienced figures in New York City EMS history. From his early days in the streets of Brooklyn as a paramedic to his leadership roles within the FDNY as a special operations lieutenant on the EMS side, administrative captain and commanding officer of emergency medical dispatch, he's seen the EMS profession evolve in real time over the course of nearly 5 decades, and rather responding to multi-casualty incidents, as we'll talk about tonight, managing dispatch systems for a city of millions, or conducting paramilitary rescue operations overseas, touching on his military service, his life has been dedicated to service in every sense of the word. And that, for this volume 74 of the Best of the Bravest, interviews with the FDNY's elite, we're taking a trip to Sternville, baby. Mitch the Shark Stern is here tonight. Welcome, sir. How are you?
Oh, thank you for having me, Mike.
Thank you for being here. So before we get into anything, and you did a lot, we'll talk about where you grew up first and how that set the stage for things. You were telling me off the air. Why don't you fill the audience in on the air?
Well, I'm born in Brooklyn on Ocean Parkway, and I grew up in that neighborhood. And I got a taste of EMS by having a friend that had already worked for EMS. And he told me about his endeavors, how he started an IV under a car. His name was Artie Corso. Most of the guys know him. And after that, I knew Mark and I knew Davin, his partner, was a friend of mine off duty. And I, like Mark said in his portion, I happened to ride with them. I wanted to take a taste of it. And we went to Coney Island on a cardiac arrest. And it was my first endeavor to see a save. And all the people around was clapping and applauding. And that kind of sealed the deal. I got my EMT license in 1974. And I worked for 3 private ambulance companies. Minutemen, which was owned by Bruce Effris, who was the dispatcher up at 377 Broadway. And then I worked for Bay Ridge Ambulance with David Lerick, who is also an EMS provider. And I finished up working with Empire Ambulance. My partner, Donna Laurie, she was the first person that was killed by the son of Sam. After that was over, I applied for EMS. I spoke with Arnold Pack, and I badgered him to hire me. And it was May 25th, and I was 17. And he didn't want to do it, but he said, if I put you in the academy, I think it was Ruth Montgomery, who was the teacher in Maspeth, I would turn 18 on June 12th. So he agreed to that. And I started in this, if you want to call it an academy, it was a classroom with pillows to do CPR and pieces of wood and cloth to make your splints, and how to put on a Thomas half ring, and how to use the poles and pads. Not much equipment back then.
No, not at all. We're talking with Mitch Stern here on volume 74 of the Best, the Bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. And at the same time, too, not too long after this, you weren't an EMT too long, because from 74 right into 78 is when you decided to become a medic. So, I mean, medics essentially, even though training was a lot different back then, you're essentially a field doctor. There's a lot that you have to do in the field and a lot that goes into pre-hospital care on that level. And 9 times out of 10, it's at the ALS level. So I imagine you mentioned just getting the bug from seeing guys around you going into that work. I mean, you were working with some medics. I imagine it was more the same thing. You saw what they were doing. You wanted to do the same thing.
It was a calling. I just had to be a paramedic. It was in my plans. I put in for the first class or second class, but I was too new, I was told, and I went into Jacoby 7, which was the last class at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. Okay. And I graduated, and they sent me to Coney Island with Mark and Davin, and we became a training bus, and we had Jerry came with us, and Jerry Gumbo. We had Joel Friedman. Mike Granton went with us. Great guy. I worked with him for a while on the ambulance. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
time.
Yeah, and you wore a lot of hats over the course of your career. Let me just take a swig of water here real quick.
Go ahead.
That being said, at that time, so what year, because you became a medic in 78, is that the same year New York City EMS hired you, or was that a little bit later on?
They hired me in 77. I didn't go into the medic class till 79, and I graduated in January of 1980. And I got assigned because I knew Chief Becker, who was a great man. And they put me with Mark and Davin. And to tell you the truth, Mark Peck happens to be the best medic I ever saw in my life. And I clamored to be half as good as he was when I first met him.
Yeah, he was, quite frankly, as many people who know from working with him have said, a wizard out in the field. And so here you are working the streets at this time. And as I covered with some of the other guys that have been on, it's a lot to do. It's not just the violent crimes that are occurring, and they're occurring quite a bit at this time in the city. These are the Wild West days. Just a lot of medicals in general. You got difficulty breathing calls. You got, just somebody generally not feeling well. And, you got to handle those in addition to all the craziness that you put up with. So just dealing with that type of call volume. I mean, again, does it wear you out? Yeah, you get your money's worth in a given shift. But at the same time, I feel like that was the best education because you were doing these things so much, seeing these things so much. You got really good, really fast at handling these different types of emergencies.
With the two guys that I was working with, it was great. And we were buffs. So we would take on as many medical calls. We were not trauma junkies. I mean, when I was an EMT, I was at Cumberland Hospital in East New York. Bed-Stuy, and when you treat people good in a lower socioeconomic neighborhood, you get treated back very, very well. And it was a rough ride back then. We had a lot of stabbings. That's where my trauma came into play. But I started on a bread box with an MVO, and if I went up into the buildings by myself, and if I needed anything, a chair, the stair chair or the poles and pads, I'd have to radio him and he would bring it up to me. So at that point in time, in the mid 70s, we were doing everything by ourselves. And you had to call the MVO. And I was medic 325, and I covered the Methodist area. And in Fort Greene, I remember one day, we went to the first MCI in New York. It was a Mr. Softy truck that had blown up, and all the glass was coming down on people. It was mass chaos. There was no format. There was no reason. Ambulances came, picked up a patient, and left. And the only reason I knew that I was there is that I got a picture from a Spanish newspaper, and somebody circled it in my head, and they put it up on the board at Cumberland. So working those years, I got a lot of trauma training.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then with Mark and Davin, I used to do IVs with Davin, and Davin would do intubation. We had it all set up. Same thing with Mark. I knew how he liked the bus. He was a nut on everything being in perfect place. I'll tell you a little story Mark didn't tell you. We had a father of a firefighter back then. And back then, it was really rough. We had old-time firemen that were yelling at us to get the patient to the hospital. You're not doctors. Well, one of the fathers of the firemen had what we call R-on-T, where one of the compression waves comes early on the heart, and it bounces the heart into a ventricular rhythm.
You're a busy man. Live podcasting, baby.
After that, yeah, right. After that, Mark was ahead of him, and he noticed that the guy had dropped down on the stretch. He was just talking to us. Mark cardioverted him, and the guy sat up screaming. And I guess the company knew that we had just saved his father. And we brought him into Coney Island, and then we were invited for dinners and for lunch, and we had a load of medical calls out there, and we were good. In Coney Island, you had your trauma, and at that time, we were Medic 385. We were the only medic unit in the south of Brooklyn. Medic 386 didn't come in for at least about 6 to 8 months, but we had from Canarsie to Avenue H all the way to Coney Island. We had our choice of calls. Because the calls came in so slow back then, we would go to the precinct, sign out a PD radio, and in time, we got to know all the cops on the street, and they would be calling us right on the radio. They call us the 10th Division paramedics.
That's what Dave Burns is saying in the chat. He's on LinkedIn. He's watching. He says, good to see you, a.k.a. 10th Division medics.
Yep. That's what we were. And it was good because we got to the calls a lot faster. I mean, the EMS dispatchers did not like it because, they had to do their job, which I learned when I took over communications. But we had a lot of backup. We taught the BLS how to put an IV together. I wanted them to feel like they were part of the job, not standing around. So in the station, when you had a break, I would show them the new equipment that we had gotten and that we were working with.
Yeah, absolutely. That's important because I mean, you can't be, and I'm learning this now as I'm beginning my EMS portion of my career, which is you can't be afraid of the equipment because you got to know how to use it. It's not just you using it on a BLS level as an EMT, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to be partnered up with the medic. It doesn't matter where you are. Very rarely is going to be 2 EMTs on the bus unless it's a BLS bus. So even then, you got to be a good partner. If you're not going to use the equipment, know where it is, know how to put it together, and let the medic do their magic. Any type of second where you're delaying is going to delay that patient care, which you don't want, which you don't need. Now, you mentioned Fort Greene. So was this before you became a lieutenant, which I'll get to momentarily? Was this Station 13 where you were signed up off the rip, or was this a different part of Brooklyn?
No. I got the job and I was assigned to Cumberland Hospital.
Okay.
And I was signed Methodist 325. Back then, the radio designations were different. So I was EMS 325, and we parked in the Methodist Hospital driveway, and we did a lot of the calls in Prospect Heights and in that area, 4th Avenue up to 86th Street, and then back down. We would go to Fort Greene. I stayed there for a while till the paramedic course test came out. I took it. I got it here. I got 100 on it, and they assigned me to Coney Island. They gave you a dream sheet, and I got my stint in Coney Island.
There you go. And there was a lot to do back then because people think of Coney Island, they think of the park. And listen, Coney Island is not the same level as Bed-Stuy or some of these other more dangerous parts of the borough, but it's not peaches and cream either. You're going to do a lot, especially back then. You're going to see a lot. And yeah, your hands full.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Granton. We went to an EDP call and there was a refrigerator that was thrown down the stairs at us. There was some crazy stuff that we went through. Me and Mike Granton went to an EDP and we heard somebody in the backyard talking. So we didn't know if we should wait for the cops or use our long flashlights. But it turned out to be a guy in his house sitting there having a cigar. So you get all these crazy calls.
And working the bus back then, again, it's not even just the crazy calls. It's just I don't want to call them routine. Nothing's ever routine because routine can turn upside down in a heartbeat. But even just the diff breathers, even just the elderly patients, seeing that back then, I mean, if we're talking a given tour, especially on the nights, I feel like the nights were crazier. How many calls in a given tour, give or take?
Oh, man, we went after everything. Mark would know more than me we did about 10 to 12 to even 18 calls a night with about maybe half transports.
Oh, wow. That's a long time. Even if you got hospitals in the area, that's quite a bit. By the way, briefly, hello to Garrett Lindgren. Garrett, we still got to do our show on the 95 St. George Hotel fire. I'm trying to see if we can get one more guy, and then you, myself, and that other guy, or even just you and me can talk about that job.
I remember that fire.
Garrett was there on the second rescue unit to arrive that night. So that is a show I need to do in the future. Good to see you, my friend. And Mark Peck mentions, yes, I think Mitch had the gift of gab and got the 6'1" sergeant to allow us to sign out a portable, and we chased real jobs every night.
He remembers.
He remembers. Listen, that's
listen. I wanted to be like Mark Peck, and as we used to go to refresher, he turned to me one day after we were taking tests, and he said, "You know something, Shark? You've made it. You're as good as I am," or some words to that effect. And I was flabbergasted by that. And I really appreciated it because I looked up to him I looked up to Davin because those are the guys that I worked with, and I trained the other guys that went up in rank in the job.
Absolutely. They paved the way for you, and you walked through that door. And I too want to be like Mark Peck when I grow up. So shout out to Mark. It's always good to see you in the audience, my friend. Volume 74, the best, the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite, with New York City EMS and FDNY EMS veteran Mitch Stern. Did 35 years between both, or more than that, actually close to 50 years between pre-merger and post-merger. So that brings us into 86, to where, again, you had a lot of command roles over the course of your career. You became what was new at the time. New York City EMS did not have a patrol lieutenant at that time. It was more of an administrative position. With your promotion to lieutenant in 86, you became that. So before I get into what that role entailed, like I like asking guys on either side of the coin, PD or FD, that move up in rank, was being an officer, was being a boss something you wanted it from the get, or did that just come to you as you kept going in your career?
Bobby Becker got raised to Maspeth. He became chief of operations, and he promoted me to lieutenant, and he sent me to Station 13, which is Bellevue. And I worked at the station, and then Chief McCracken was working in the borough office with Neil Mangrone. These guys are a long time gone already, but except for Chief McCracken, who helped me out a lot. He don't know it, but it was his moves that put me in the position that I finally went to. But I worked there, and then they made me car 315. Now, because they were so limited on personnel, if you got a second alarm or better, and they needed coordination of units on scene, the lieutenant had to close the station. Nobody can get gas now, and he's tied up at the scene, and it might be a tour change. Everything can go wrong at once. So I was car 315 in Manhattan. And at that time, SOD was created by Chief Becker and Chief McNally. And John Lazaro, I believe, was the first captain that ran it. And after being out in the field for about a year, he put me in SOD. And that was an eye opener. We had citywide as our playground, and you were the only one that would go to every MCI or any job you wanted. I went to the polar bear job where in Prospect Park, the polar bear ate the kid.
Jeez.
3 kids jumped over to swim in the moat one night, and they all got out, but they threw the other kids' clothes in, and the polar bear came down and grabbed them. And I got there, and the 38s didn't do anything to it. It just stood up on its hind legs, and ESU came with shotguns, and they finally put it down.
My
I mean,
goodness.
the calls, you couldn't believe what calls.
I mean,
Guy jumps out of the G building and lands on a picket fence. And, you know, between everything. And then in 86, I was working under Steve Kerr at that time because John Lazaro got promoted to communications. And I was doing pre-planning for Steve. He had me go to all the places that would pose a problem. And he also sent me to the first ever incident command class, which started off from Los Angeles, from the Orange County Chiefs Association, because back in, I think, 74, they had Orange County forest fires, and about 9 medics or EMTs were killed because they didn't have the radios that were on the same frequency. So that was one of the failures. Plus, all these companies that came in as help from different areas, they got together and they put together this incident command system, which became a learning point. So I went to that class, and I was fascinated by it. And then I went back to Steve, and unless he went with me, I don't recall. But I know Bobby Inarelli was with me. Um, it was a great learning experience, and hearing from them what went wrong. And one night, uh, Steve made me the training officer for incident command. And one night I was at my friend Doug's house, may he rest in peace, and he had the Christmas trains up, and we had some company over. And they asked us what I do for a living. And I took the two trains and I hit them together. And I said, there's patients there, there's hazardous material there. I'm the guy that's going to go there and set up all of the sectors that we need to put this and save as many people as we can. And with that, I came up with this idea. And I said to JP Martin, who was in the unit, why don't we make a fake city? And it was large. It was Sternville. Well, that was JP who named it. But I said, let's get HO buildings. Bobby Becker gave us $1,500. I called the little car toys. What were they, Hot Wheels?
Yeah,
They
I had
gave
them as a kid.
they gave us like 1,500 vehicles, and we started training at Sternville, and it worked out unbelievable. So, getting to a scene rather than looking up and out of it, now you can look down on it and you could see the real setting up of sectors and the communication relay and who has to take what role. And we designed, Zach Goldfarb started it. There's JP Martin Expressway. They made ambulances for us, and we made every type of incident that could happen in the city. There was a water feature, there's building collapses, there's a high rise. We had a little MCI where it was a car crash and one of the light poles fell down and there was hazardous material. So, how are you going to handle that? It was great. And I think I taught hundreds of new EMTs, captains, chiefs. It turned out to be a natural thing for me.
And out in the field, you got to think on your feet too. And I think, and people think of MCIs as the building collapses and as the major emergencies that we'll get into. But sometimes it is the car accident where you're pulling up as the first unit. There's 5 patients and there's just 2 of you. In some variation, shape, or form, that's an MCI as well. So it forces you to think, okay, what would I do? What would I do originally as the responder? What resources am I going to call in? And I feel like that it goes back to preparation. It goes back to pre-planning, rather, like you were talking
Right.
about. Allows you to work out the kinks and work out whatever mistakes now. That way, they don't happen out in the field. So, I mean, that teaching, that's gold right there. Because, hey, especially in a city like New York, you're gonna come upon situations like that.
Well, you got to critique some of the calls and bring people in. Um, Incident command, here is my theory, and I've seen enough mass casualty incidents to say it. In the first few minutes, it's like a wild stampede of horses. And then you got the cavalry that has to pull them all together and put them back in their corral. So I went to a call where they brought me out 6 people that were not breathing. I intubated 6 of them and made the firemen do the CPR. And then finally the cavalry came. Now you have to understand one thing. In New York City, before the merger, we had tour commanders. The tour commander would be in the communication center. I was a tour commander. I would make the decision on the unit deployment based on what I'm hearing off of fire, PD, or Port Authority. We had all the phones, the hotlines to them. And I would be the one to put out the proper response mode. If I needed the MERV based on patient count, an MCI, I mean, the definition is anything that overloads the caretaker, that puts you at a disadvantage. So 3 to 7 people, one person can manage those people, but it depends on what they're doing. If they're working in hazmat, you need a safety officer. If they're raining, or if the building there's either an open or a closed MCI. It's either active or inactive. There's a whole list of it. And it starts with the initial notification, which you get at the communication center. I hear it. I make the determination on what resources are needed, and I dictate what they need there. When the first officer gets on the scene, they'll give me a preliminary report, and if I have to escalate it, I will escalate it. If it's stabilized, it'll be stabilized if there's enough units. And then we start to de-escalate, we terminate it, and everybody goes back on duty. So those are the kind of steps involved in it.
I wanted to ask you about this. Well, before I do, Steve Kersh in the chat, he says Sternville was an invaluable tool in training new officers and medical incident command. Mitch and JP made all that happen. So he definitely gives you a lot of credit for that. But one thing I noticed, and I talked about this with Steve, I talked about this with Zach Goldfarb when they both came on a little while ago, is you had these special, which I think were very cool, pre-merger, these special operations REPs, which look, I believe these are the old NYPD emergency service REPs. So you were using these, and again, special operations was citywide, so there was no job in the city that this division, if necessary, couldn't hop on. What were you guys carrying in these normally?
Well, in those trucks, if I'm correct, let Steve correct me because he was the boss of the unit. That was our emergency response crew. And they would carry hazardous material equipment, showers, portable showers. I don't remember when we got the equipment. Steve would know better than me, but those big trucks were for hazmat jobs, or if we needed extra equipment. They carried backboards, they carried oxygen. So they were our backup to our operation.
Okay. All right. And in some variation, though, state, there's another picture even after the merger, which we'll touch on later, where I think, oh, here it is. I have it right here. Hang on. I'll share the screen momentarily. They were painted over into FDNY decals, and they kind of kept the concept. And I wish this concept stayed around longer, rather, because you had these too. I guess same thing, right?
Yeah. I don't know where they got them. Steve would know. All I can say is that my incident command career climbed up the ladder because of Steve, and I'll give him all the kudos for that.
Well, listen.
And McCracken sent me to the Emmitsburg, the National Fire Academy, where we did a mock disaster of a Category 5 hurricane. And we stayed there for a week, and it was amazing training.
Now and come in handy.
Steve made sure that, I had that training.
And that kind of plays perfectly, too. I mean, I'm not going to skip over Happy Land. I'm going to come back to Happy Land in a moment. But think about it. You had that flooding in 92. That really put this. So you were there for that, I imagine. Or
yes.
Yeah. So there you go. That training came in handy. Just, I guess, before I touch on Happy Land, since you segued into it perfectly, what was that response like? Because people forget about that incident.
Well, what happened was I got reassigned for a reason to Kings County. And when I heard that go over, I made it to the Bronx faster than any officer did. And I took command of the Happy Land Social Club fire. And I was probably the only EMS person that went into the building and observed 88 people on the floors just on top of each other because, the smoke inhalation. And they all looked, you get cherry red when you use carbon monoxide. So this fire produced 88 deaths. The fire battalion chief came to me, says, how you want to handle this? I said, let's get body bags. Next door was a body shop. We couldn't take them out the front door because there was no stairwell. So I said, let's put each person in the body bag, break through the wall, make us an entrance into the body shop, and let's take the people down. We'll have EMTs wash their faces. They'll take a picture of each person and bring it to the school down the block. And that's how we organize that, so the families can identify without having to see them in a raw, way.
Right.
And it worked out perfectly.
And that night, and I'll get back to the flooding in '92 in a little bit, but since you bring it up, there's test of your metal, and then there's test of your metal, for lack of a better way to word it. And that gets dwarfed. It's hard to believe it's 35 years since that incident because of things that would happen later. But that was that was probably the worst fire. Not probably, it was the worst fire New York City had since the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire of the early 1900s, 1912.
So
yeah, so you're going there to that, and the reason why that started, it was a classic case that really spiraled out of control.
In the back.
Yep, jilted lover syndrome. Basically, in this case, the guy's mad at his girl. If he can't have her, nobody can. Then he lights the club on fire, and people couldn't get out. A lot of building code violations there that came out later, but nevertheless, getting down there. I mean, you just touched on it. You had to think on the fly because there's so many bodies. Unfortunately, there's not really anything you could do for them. But there's.
I didn't know there was that many bodies. Nobody told me.
They just got there and saw it.
I got there and I just made my way into the building because the fire was out, and all you saw. I mean, I explained it like it was like carpeting. People were just on top of each other. You could not put your foot on the floor. You had to walk on top of people to get to the back room where I guess the other 40 people were. It was a real shame. It hit me hard afterwards because I remember Walter Kowalczyk. We were on the MERV together, and I kept talking about it, and I guess that was my way of getting it off my mind.
Right.
And Walter says to me, "Are you all right?" I said, "No, I'm fine. I'm fine." But for Walter to pick up on that was really good. So and Walter was a great boss too. So
absolutely. And the sad part about that, to your point, is, and I'll word this delicately in case anybody who may have known somebody who was killed that night is watching, but they were at the back door, all trying to get out at once. And in a panic, what do people do? They crowd the door. It's just, it's basic instinct because we're in our right frame of mind talking now. We're not in a dangerous situation to say, yeah, you shouldn't crowd the door. But when you're panicking, you forget everything, which is why it's so important, especially for those going in the emergency response field in any form. They teach that in fire academy and police academy and EMS academy, staying calm under pressure. If you're a civilian, that's not a concept that is put into practice in a situation like this. So many of the victims that lost their lives in this senseless tragedy that night, to your point, were by the door doing everything they can to push through the door to get out, but they just couldn't get out in time.
Well, Sternville helped me out also. I mean, just watching the way the officers we started with the grassroots EMTs, and they were overwhelmed by it all, by just a simple second alarm fire that we made them, read the book. We had a book, and then you come in and you take over command and you decide what you're going to do there. And then we critiqued it as a classroom. And I know Steve came up sometimes to overview everything, and I had videos of mistakes that were made that I would play for them, and they would be taken aback by what they saw. And I used different components to teach. We also taught hazmat, the diamond shaped and the numbers and what they meant. We did a lot with them to prepare them for the field. And we even taught lieutenants. A lot of lieutenants had no idea on what I'm supposed to do. I mean, they would get on the radio and you would hear that they were flopping around, like they couldn't get their words out. And they were in a mess right there. So on those calls, I would try to get to as fast as I could, and help them start setting everything up as it should be. Because it's very overwhelming when you get to some of these jobs. I went to the Met where somebody threw out a tear gas. I had an onslaught of people coming out. I needed 2 MERVs. I had a 32 car collision on the Cross Island in Queens. That there's a parkway there. It was raining, and Chief Hannigan was my staging officer. He was in SOD with me, and a Hanafi. I'm sorry, my old mind is going. um, we all worked together. We all talked about it. It was Steve's idea with pre-planning went beautiful. The pre-plan that we put into it was how many people are here during the day, how many are here at night. Do you work like with gold or jewelry where you're using chemicals to dip the gold or whatever? All of these things. And we had a high rise, just like 9/11, but we didn't ever think that 2 planes would hit them. Even
Right.
when we did a fire, we had a little window with a fire, and the guys had to make groups of people that would go up and take care of the patients, decide to stay a couple floors down, let fire bring you the patients. I mean, I was all over the city. I had the Union Square train derailment.
I was going to ask you about that. You read my mind perfectly, because this is literally Happy Land happens, and then not too long after that, Rob Ray. I did a show on that with Patty Pogan, Mike
Yeah,
Penna from FDNY Rescue, and forget who the other gentleman I had on for that show is, Rick Martinez from Truck 3 Emergency Service.
yeah.
And we covered that. The train conductor, Rob Ray, was drunk. So he's going well over the speed limit. The train jumps, and you got how many casualties there. So I never got the EMS side of that. I got the PD and the FD side of that. So go ahead.
I got downstairs, and we had a problem a little bit with the radios, but I called in for more resources and for the MERV. I don't remember which bosses were with me, but I have to say the bosses really treated me great. They looked up to me. They knew that I was calm enough to take care of what needed to be taken care of. But when we merged, because fire had a tour commander, they abolished our thing. Now, when a fire tour commander gets to the scene of a mass casualty incident, I know they know incident command, but within the parameters of a firefight, there's different incident command structures in a fire or in patient care. So how is a tour command or battalion chief going to get the information he needs to call on the resources they need? And
Right.
I fought that tooth and nail. But, which leads me to the merger. And
Well,
why?
before I get to that, because there's a couple of things I want to cover in that time frame. You mentioned something earlier in regards to commands and in regards to, of course, making sure your lieutenants aren't flopping around. Your lieutenants are really the first officers on scene more times often than not. They're your middleman before all the bigger bosses, the captains, the chiefs, get to something like that. Talking about the EMS side, and really it applies to police and fire as well. I mean, police is a little different because your first boss is often a sergeant, but nevertheless, you get what I'm saying.
Right.
So, in line with these plans, you were already before, and we'll get to the merger momentarily, but you were already crafting these plans for your side of things in regards to something like, for example, the 93 Trade Center bombing. You had it applied at the train derailment to in Union Square 91, but fast forward to 93 and something like that. How do you think those plans worked on the EMS end, if you had to grade it in retrospect?
Well, unfortunately, I had operation on my knee, so I was stuck. At that time, I got reassigned to Woodhull because Woodhull didn't have a lieutenant. They had a chief. So I was the administrative lieutenant. So basically, I ran the station in Woodhull.
Okay.
And I didn't get a chance to go to 93, but I'm sure all the bosses that went there I would hope that they would sit down and discuss, you know, who handled what. You know, I believe in body cameras on all EMS personnel. I mean, we could learn a lot from that. But, you know, it's up to the budgetary constraints and stuff like that. But um, Steve would know better about 93, I think, than I would, because I wasn't there.
I had Zach on for that show too a while ago when I covered the 30th anniversary of that with a few other guys. So Zach did a good job of diving into it. And these plans, well, I'm pretty sure they were helpful as Zach described them. I wanted to get your perspective on it too. So, you know, I'll set the stage and then we talked about this off the air. Well, now we can get into it on the air. So as Commissioner Safer, and there's different perspectives on it. I got Billy Gross's a couple weeks ago. I got Mark Peck's as well. Commissioner Safer, a year before he died, and I miss him a lot. He was very good to me. He came on the show, and one of the last things he did before he left to go be the police commissioner, of which he was a fantastic police commissioner, was he wanted to see that merger through. He was one of the parties that wanted to see it through. As he told me, he says, and you know, an FDNY firefighter, well, he's still fire commissioner, says to him one day, you know, boss, we have one of the worst mortality rates in the city. And he kind of stunned. He's like, why? And he mentions the fact that, you know, a bus has to come from the other side of the borough, essentially, when so many times, more often than not, there's an engine right there that could have responded on the run. So, okay, the wheels get put in motion. Naturally, some people are opponents, and that brings you in there. So you were on the inside. You were in the eye of the storm. Oh. Go through it.
All right, here's the real story.
Okay.
About the merger and then what happened with this CFR program after the merger. The merger was for two reasons, from what I'm told. The first one, Giuliani came across a woman with a broken leg or a child up in Harlem. They wanted to go to Jacoby because everyone tells you my medical records. It has nothing to do with the present injury that you're teaching. You know, you don't need all the records of a car when you're fixing the carburetor. I mean, that's the problem. So Giuliani insisted they went to Jacoby. Now, we had a 10-minute rule. If it takes you 2 minutes to go to a hospital, we can add on 10 minutes, and that would suffice, giving enough time for the crew to get back into their call area or go to the station to resupply and get back out. So there's this 40-second rule I heard that anybody that's going to get chopped at a high level, they get 40 seconds or 40 minutes to chop whoever they want. And Giuliani turned around and said, well, I'm going to merge them because why? One, he had a diversity problem with the fire department. We all know that. Women, African American, there was a whole big thing about that, and every congressman wrote about that. So they figured, well, if we combine them, hey, that takes care of that problem, you know, and that's the thought back then. Now, when I was in communications, and I don't want to lose that thought I was talking about, when the merger happened, they didn't want us in communications to really do anything. They thought it was going to be like their communications. They wanted a battalion-based model. And what happened was they had this big meeting with all of the big shots, and they called me in. I was dead set against it. And I told everybody. And when I was there, they came to me around the table. And I stood up and I said, a battalion-based model is not going to work in New York City. You have too many variables. The unit has to go to the call. Then it has to either gas up or it's got to restock or it's got to go to a hospital 10 minutes away. And then they got to go back to their area. In a battalion-based model, they go to the fire, they go back to their house and they clean up and get ready for the next one while maybe there's a redeployment of another engine or a truck company to cover for them. We didn't have that luxury. We did not have enough ambulances to do that. That's why it was better for us for the tour commander to decide. I got a picture of the whole city. I know what's going on. We had maps, communications. Chief Diggs was assigned as the chief of communications. They never came to Metro Tech where I worked. He made me the commanding officer, and like I said, it just a battalion-based model wasn't going to work. It will never work. The only reason it will work is if you had 600 ambulances. I think we only have 400 and something in the street, and it just won't work. And they got mad at me. There was a guy there, I don't know his name. Steve knows his name. He was in a suit. He said, why at the 11th hour does this guy come in here and tell us that it's not going to work? Now, McCracken turned around and told, at the time, it was chief of communications, why didn't you tell Captain Stern about it? And he said, because it was marked, for your eyes only. And they got into a little argument, but then everybody hated me, which, I'm not going to lie. I always told them what I thought on my mind, and it never happened. And the battalion-based model, there's so much that I could spill out on this show, but John Perugia, a great guy. He knew the computer very well. He hooked up with Nigro, and he got his promotion. And then when Maspeth fell apart, the whole building collapsed. Maspeth, matter of fact, I looked it up. It says place of bad water. It was a liquor store, and it had rubble holes underneath. And the whole 400 square foot floor collapsed 7 inches. They called me at home, and they said, we lost everything. I drove from Staten Island, and I stayed there for 2 months. They had to bring in a Con Edison generator. We had to get telephone lines, but yet we didn't lose a call. And anytime our system would crash, we go to paper. There was a backup for that too. And we would get the calls on the phone instead of getting them through the CAD system. I know Pfeiffer came on in 81.
Yeah.
But EMS was so far ahead of the fire department in its dispatching, and I would say their incident command was different than ours. They had no idea. Maybe if they had come to one of ours, they would get the idea of how many ambulances and specialty units they're going to need.
And a little bit more context here from Mark Peck. Mark Peck mentions the following. He says, for a little more detail, the battalion-based trial essentially took 2 or 3 BLS and an ALS unit and had them sit at a street corner as if they built a new station there, the imaginary station. And that's the thing that, that was on my mind as you were explaining this, and thanks for the input, Mark, where I get the concept. I'm not critiquing, but then again, and I don't think they were coming at it from a bad place, but they're thinking the fire mode. They're thinking what they're used to, which is I'm not saying the engines in New York City don't run. Of course they do. But you can put an engine in a station. You can have guys have quarters in between runs where they know they can come back, stock the engine, put it away, go upstairs, decompress from the run until the next one comes in, whatever it may be, EMS, a box, an MVA, or otherwise. You don't have that luxury in EMS. You park them on a corner, they're just going to go. They run way too much, especially in New York City, to ever have a chance to dock in quarters.
That's why they went to diesel. I knew the mechanics because I was in Maspeth all the time, and the shop was in the back.
And, of course, and it makes total sense to where you're not. If you take an ambulance out in the morning after an equipment check, after roll call and whatnot, you're not going to see that bus until the end of the tour. There's just too high of a call volume.
Volume, it's astronomical.
Yeah.
And what made me a good paramedic, which they should look to change, and you should bring this up to Tucker. I was at Kings County, and there was no HIPAA. I was allowed to go into every autopsy, and the books don't do justice, ever. I saw at least 100 to 200 autopsies, and that's what made me good, great, whatever you want to rate me as a medic. And now with HIPAA, they should get us some type of clearance from the state that paramedics can go into autopsies and learn from that. Because I learned everything. You know, Mark will tell you. I mean, I had a great ear for a pneumothorax. I was on my game, and that
Absolutely. And Mark Beck also mentions, in light of what you mentioned earlier, but what caused it to totally fail was in FD, they go from station to scene. Oh, what I was just talking about. Then scene back to station. And EMS, there's this third leg that often takes them out of their response area. The
right,
hospital,
like
he says. The hospital. And as you said as well.
Hospital too.
So response times actually increase rather than decrease. And it's a little bit different where I'm at in Connecticut. But and I'll just use this department as an example since I'm a volunteer there. West Haven, right? My district has a policy, or not a policy, but an agreement rather, with AMR to where we run 4-man engines. So if the medic on the engine has to ride a call in, the engine for the time being until the medic gets back is a 3-man BLS, but it goes back to the station. The medic rides it in with AMR to the hospital. AMR brings the medic back to the fire station later on once the call is cleared and the care of the patient has been transferred over to emergency room staff. Again, they are able to go back to the station. If you're on the bus, again, and Mark brings it up, every call, you don't have the luxury of saying, okay, we're going to hand the care off. You're going to transport every call. So, even that's even with the hospitals that run their own ambulance corps in the city, you're still going to transport 9 times out of 10.
We didn't get food breaks. I mean, you know, it was on the run, and the next call was right waiting for you. And the dispatchers, now, since I was the commanding officer, in their mind, they got to get the call off the screen, because then I'm looking from my desk, and because I could dispatch right from where I was in my office. So I'm looking at the screen constantly to make sure response time stayed down. So when I see a call turn red, it's been lying in line too long. So I'm going to walk out to the dispatcher, and a lot of times, you know, guys are talking amongst each other, ladies, and whatever goes on in the dispatch and the CRO. And I got to say, come on, guys, you got to get these calls out. And here's one other thing I wanted to tell you earlier about the CFR program.
Go ahead.
The first year on my children, I got hundreds of calls where the CFR truck parked on the corner, waited for the ambulance, and then the fire truck said EMS 84 were taken up. And that happened in the first year like you have no idea. And nobody in a high level is going to say nothing because they'll get chopped at the neck. I mean,
right.
So people stay quiet. You know, nobody wants to say anything. And it's terrible. And that's why I say get the money for cameras on these new employees that are coming out. That they said, I've spoken to them. They just want to wait those 4 years. They're really pissed off about, you know, not being firefighters.
Retention is hard. Retention's hard because primarily the pay's not that good either. You gotta, and that's something you know all too well. The pay has never been good.
I started at $9,400 a year.
It's not enough.
Now I know everything was cheaper back then.
Yeah, but even then.
And this is how I feel. We're in the back of a square box. People will not tell us they got AIDS or they got a communicable disease. They will not say anything to us. We've got needle sticks. We even had Tracy Allen that died.
Yeah, she got stuck. Yeah.
You know, it happens. You know, we got rough patients. They don't understand what's going on. We try to communicate, but maybe they're a little hypoxic or, you know, they don't know where they are. You know, being a medic is really a tough job. And I don't think the firemen get it. I like the idea that the firemen go to EMT, but I don't like the idea that they're taking them off the fires, because unless you put cameras on them, and everybody in police, my son-in-law is a cop. The lieutenant on the day tour reviews all the tapes, and if he sees anything, he takes action.
Right.
Whether the guy's going to get, take a hit or have to write a report, an incident report. So, and also in communications, we're the officers that will call a lieutenant and say, I need an unusual occurrence report on this call, which they might not know why, but I do, because I got the phone call from upstairs, because that was where headquarters was.
Right. You're the one that often has to deal with it.
But the best training I ever had was at Emmitsburg, Maryland. And Bobby Brown couldn't make it, so they sent me. And I owe that all to Chief McCracken, because it was a tremendous building. They had actual TV station. And every day our mailbox would get notifications on where geographically this category 5 is coming. Con Ed was there also. We had everybody at their stations. And the best guy that I've ever met was Donald Burns. Mm-hmm. After the class, we went for a beer, and they had a place there. And he said, in 25 years, you'll see the difference, Mitch. But I think nobody wanted this. You can't run a bagel store and a pizzeria. And I had both of them at different times. You just can't do that. And this is what it's like,
And there's been even talk recently, and I don't want this to come. And listen, for any of you that's listening in the audience, active or retired from the FDNY, this is not either Mitch or myself bashing the FDNY. That's not the intent.
We have the best fire department in the world.
Exactly. It's coming from a place of love. But there's even been talk. Now, this I don't necessarily, and you would have a better perspective on it than I would. You lived it, I didn't. But I don't necessarily agree with it. Oren Barzilay has written about, we're coming up on 30 years since the merger, maybe like demerging. But if New York City EMS was having the problems it was having, you remember those problems very well. This is my point on the matter. Pre-merger, where they were being treated like essentially bastard stepchildren. I think for as much as there's been, this kind of clashing of policy and clashing of the heads since the FDNY merger, I think you'd go right back to the bad old days if you took it away from the FDNY. There's something in there I'm still convinced that could make the model work. I just think it's a matter of getting guys to understand and, essentially not think in fire mode, which is not their fault. That's how they've been trained to think. But if you're coming into the EMS side of things, it's its own division. It's its own world.
It should be a third emergency service. That sanitation is ahead of us in the curve.
Yeah.
We should get parity what they're getting. We deal with people inside an ambulance. Now we have rescue medics that they're giving us trinkets. You know what I tell people? They said, "What'd you get in the merger?" I said, they gave us some brand new uniforms and some nice turnout gear.
Painted over the ambulance.
And they painted over the ambulances. Now, I have to tell you one thing I've seen. When I was a paramedic, the firemen were old timers. They were nasty with us. I had a battle with one that I don't, and his brother or son that I don't want to mention their name.
That's fine.
But we had a fight outside on a call, and it sparked a $35 million lawsuit. And we need to get parity. And I see a chief can't go in front of the city council. Now, I've got every booklet that we got. Welcome to the fire department. I got Richie McGowan's report to the city council, why the merger is not going to work. He wrote down, may he rest in peace, a beautiful piece. I have it. I also have Welcome to the Fire Department. I got their writing. And then I got another book from them that they put together, welcome joining, this and that and the other. I respect them. I think what happened was, now that it's 20 years later and a lot of guys had to do the EMT work before they stepped onto fire, they do now understand how rough our job is and how it could drive you nuts.
Yeah.
back
You
then,
don't stop. You don't. You
the,
said it earlier. You don't stop. It's
no,
like I'm not trying to be funny here, but it's like that episode of Seinfeld where
yeah,
they asked Newman about the post office. He says the mail never stops. I'll
that's
flip that on
right.
its head. The EMS never stops. And before you continue, uh, Chris Ebden and Mark Peck bring up a couple of points. To Chris Ebden's point, he lived it too, as did Mark. He says instead of being health and hospital stepchildren, a third service would make it the police department and the fire department stepchild. And Mark adds, personally, I favor a third service that is adequately funded, staff with true pay, parity to the fire department and police department. What existed when we were New York City EMS was not an independent agency. We were a stepchild of Health and Hospitals Corps. Health and Hospitals Corps controlled us as if we were just another hospital, he goes on to add in another
Yep,
comment. So there's a lot of red
absolutely.
tape there that it almost feels, and I don't think it's impossible, and neither do you, to cut through that red tape, especially with the resources and knowledge we have available to us now. It just seems more of an unwillingness to
Well,
cut through that red tape.
there is an unwillingness, and that's why a guy like me that's retired, I can go in front of city council and I could yap my mouth off and tell
You got nothing
them,
to lose. They're not
"Oh,
going to hurt you. You
I
got your
got
pension.
nothing to lose." That's why none of these chiefs or anybody is going to really say what they feel,
Yeah.
because I know deep inside which chief feels what. And I heard one of your reports that Feehan loved EMS. I, on my children, was in his office on Livingston Street when an ambulance was coming down the street. His remarks were, "I wish I had a shoulder-fired missile so I could slam it right into the fire truck, to the ambulance." So help me God. Feehan hated this merger. I
Yeah.
don't care what anyone says. But, Nigro did his best. He dumped it on his desk. What is he going to do? Argue? And then you get the wrath. All these chiefs that Donald Burns was the only one that I sat, and he really respected me, and said they should have never merged you.
Yeah.
Just the same way I say.
Well, there, and Mike Grant adds too. We were still in the same civilian union 2507. We need to be the fourth uniform service: PD, FD, sanitation, EMS. Now, and it's interesting too because I won't. I mentioned this before. I'm not going to name the individual that told me this on the NYPD side. We'll leave him anonymous. But he did. I talk to this individual every now and then. He was pretty. Let's just say he was pretty high up on the food chain in the New York City Police Department for a very long time. And he said to me, and I'll never forget this conversation. I mentioned this before, like I said, Mike, we almost had EMS in 96. And I said, really? So and so. Why didn't PD take it then? Because that's what everybody thought was going to happen. PD was going to take it.
That's right.
I remember Chief Goldfarb telling me that when he came on a while ago. Because they were closer in uniform and just closer in camaraderie and rank structure with the police department and the fire department. He says, I kid you not, he says, the higher ups at the time, he said, we did not want to foot the medical bill. The cost of the medical bills was going to be astronomical. The police department didn't feel like they wanted to take that on. So that was
their budget.
Yeah. Garrett Lindgren. Sorry, before you continue, he says I did both jobs. He says he was EMS 1978 to 1981, FDNY 1981 to 2002. Mitch's negative experiences with firefighters sound like some of the negative experiences I had with EMS as a firefighter. Yeah, it was a bad relationship back then, just because again, lack of an understanding. And you got a point, Garrett. You got a point. So just before we continue too,
had old timers.
Yeah, and then I think that was the big problem too on both sides of the aisle. So that's fair. Before we continue though, did you make captain before the merger or post merger?
I made captain in 1996.
Okay, so around that time, right before.
And then they put me in communications, and then Diggs made me the commanding officer, and I stayed there until the Maspeth, and then I brought. They put trailers in the backyard. They had tested the soil and everything, and they put the trailers back there, which was terrible for these people, the dispatch and CRO. But then they found one Metrotech, and I brought them over. You got to realize, I brought EMS dispatch to the fire CO in Central Park. We did New Year's Eve from there. We did the marathon from another fire CO, because I wrote the book on Y2K for at least EMS. and that's what they use as a template. And I was in the MERV when the ball came down on Y2K, and nothing
Imagine you
happened.
breathe the sigh of relief.
Yeah, we all did,
Yeah.
but I was in the Central Park CO. So in the event something did happen, we had set up an auxiliary communications sector. And I got to give a lot of credit to Tony Napoli. Tony Napoli made good friends with all of the ancillary people that we needed, dictaphone, the IT people, and all of that background stuff. You know,
Yeah, no, 110%, and it worked because I mean, listen, and now in hindsight, hindsight's 2020. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but I didn't live it. But talking with people who did, Garrett, you being one of them, and Steve Kerr and Zach Goldfarb and many others too have been on the program who lived through that. That summer of 1999, prepping for it, there was a lot of concern because I mean, listen, we nobody had ever at that point. Unless you're some sort of someone from a science fiction movie or something. Nobody had ever lived through a millennium before, and we won't live through, our generation at least will not live through a millennium again. So
I knew
definitely
Garrett.
a lot of concern.
I knew Garrett's name, but my question is, did he join EMS because he wanted to be an EMS person and then went to fire, or was the 4 year program that he? And I want to make it very clear. I think that our fire department beats out anybody in this country or around the world for that matter.
I agree.
I have spoken with the Tokyo Fire Department, their EMS provision. I have a letter where I was asked, when I was in communications, I got a visit from Sigurd Reinhold. He was on the parliamentary in England. He asked me in a letter to come to England and be the ambulance commissioner. But I didn't want to pledge my allegiance to another country. And my wife said that she had the kids packed already, but it's not what I wanted to do. So, I said, thank you very much. I think I sent you a copy of the letter.
Yeah.
But, you
Wow.
know, I think, I don't know, I
Yep.
just don't know. I mean, I want to go up and see Commissioner Tucker. He can't do anything with me. He can only say, I don't like your ideas, and, we're going to go it this way, you know.
His comments in recent years, or not recent years, recent months rather, have been interesting. Where he did say, because I have to read the article in full, but the Chief publication came out with it, and they said,
Right.
and the headline of it was Tucker, and I'm paraphrasing, the future of the FDNY is EMS. So
Well,
he gets at least, it comes across as if he is a proponent of EMS. Your thoughts on that?
my thoughts, honestly,
Yeah.
I think it's BS, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because we bailed out the fire department in diversity and inclusion, that's what he's banking on. That he don't lose his job because he has to keep it that way and satisfy all the politicians. Because everybody has a thought on how it should be. But those of us that live to be a paramedic and be, I had a saying, and Mark knows it, I'm second to no one. That was my saying all the time. If you're going to be an EMT, be second to nobody,
Right.
and you'll go a long way. And in my day, guys wanted to be on the job. We loved going to those calls. You were considered a great medic if you had a call where you had to do a chest decompression or, when I was in the military, which leads me to that, I
Yeah, we
took
didn't
a
even talk about that. Go ahead.
No, I took a year off from EMS in '74, and I joined the Air Force, and I went to PJ school, and PJ is the pararescue jumpers. We come out of the helicopters, and we go in with two Black Hawks and an ACH gunship, and we'll take the friendly or one of our own and take them back to either Kandahar or in Kuwait to another hospital that was made using bags with sand to protect them from incoming ordnance or anything like that. But my point is that these guys love being medics. I mean, medical care in the field is way different. Me and Mark used to put on triple rotating tourniquets. The idea of it was in a pulmonary edema patient, you would trap the fluid in the legs and in the hand, and now everybody has a tourniquet. And it was so set against by the doctors. So any doctor that runs EMS has their own agenda. What's right, what's wrong. Now I hear that the rescue medics finally got a portable ultrasound, which is great.
Yeah, that's a helpful tool. It's a very helpful tool.
Right.
And I think to your point, in regards to stepping stones versus it not being a stepping stone, EMS was not a segue back then per se. It is more so now. But you got guys and you got gals that get their EMT, that get their medic, and they don't necessarily want to go into fire. It's not where their heart's desire, which is fine.
I didn't want to go.
Exactly, which is fine. But I think, and this is across the board, this is not just a New York City problem. It should be to where if that's not what your heart's desire is, like me, I'll be honest, the main reason I got my EMT is because I want to get on the job. I'm honest about that. Doesn't mean I don't care about the patients. I certainly do. But that's my intent. My intent is to become a firefighter.
I hope the 82 of them have that intent also.
Exactly. So with that being said, if that's not something that you want and you just want to stay doing EMS, they should make it so to where it's easier for you to stay and make a career out of it. You can't it's hard to make a career out of it now. And it's a shame because it is very for as tough as it can be. And you know this, it is very rewarding work at the end of the day.
You know how much overtime I had to work? I have a family of 3 kids and my wife when I was married for 22 years. And I worked secondary jobs, tertiary jobs. We all did.
I can imagine.
You couldn't raise a family on 9,000. Well, by that time I was up to 30,000.
Can't even take care of yourself with that money. You can barely get by on your own if it's just you living solo.
I know.
So that's a tough thing. I did want to get back to the communications aspect of it because it's, communications, as we know from dispatch to units on the ground, is key. Throughout the 90s, we're seeing big incidents. We talked about the Union Square derailment, even though you weren't there, obviously the Trade Center bombing in 93. And then that was the segue into 9/11. Now, before I get to that morning itself, and I got to find the picture you sent me of the ambulance because I know you sent it earlier. I just got to find the email of you sending it. But were you, in terms of when, especially as a captain, when you were going over game plans for communications, for MCIs, was terrorism something you would try to focus on in those drills?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, the crews that dispatched in the CROs, they really didn't have no part in it. It was, at that time, it was my decision. Yeah. If I got a phone call from Port Authority telling me they got a plane coming in, now, of course, we fought with Port Authority all the time. ESU went right through their fence one day so we can get into the tarmac. Yeah, that was an incident. Port Authority wants to run their own airway, their own airstrips. EWR, all of them. Kennedy's the worst. Box 269. I'll never forget it. When that phone rang, you knew you had a problem. So I ask him, my questions are, how many people are on the mat? How many souls are on board? My question is, what type of craft is it? How much fuel you got left? And then I'm going to start formulating an incident plan in my head on about how many units he's going to, and what type of units he's going to require. And then, of course, what comes about is a multi-jurisdictional command post. And the purpose of that is that each agency has their own obligations that they have to complete. So you try to all talk to get what you need to get done. So I might need to put out these tops, the red, the green, the yellow, and the black at a plane incident, and have all the walking go to the green, have the medium go to the yellow, The red has to be transported, and the black, of course, are DOAs. I've been involved in writing up a theoretical plane crash several times. I have it on video.
Yep.
You know, and EMS always came through. These guys read that we put the tags on them, or when we had money, we moolaged them. And, you know, that we had a couple of what they call preceptors. They walked around and watched what the crews were doing. Is everybody being triaged properly?
And, you know, that was something that it's unfortunate to have to plan for something like that. But again, in a city like New York, you don't have a choice. You have to. If you're not, I mean, there's no other way to say it. You're being silly. And now to round out what we discussed earlier, Garrett did mention this, and I'll allude to it again. To your point about when you asked him why he joined the EMS, he says, I became an EMT in 1976, got hired by Health and Hospital Corps EMS in 1978. He started at Throop Outpost 337, Cumberland, CIH, Glenwood 316. EMS was not a segue, and he's not saying this in a negative way. He's just saying his pathway. EMS was not a segue into the FDNY back then. It's just, you know, ultimately
right.
Chips landed for him. So thank you for that post, Garrett. Again, no argument there. But
no, he needed money.
Yeah.
Ask him. He needed money.
You know, a lot of EMTs working back then did. Again, with salary like that, it's hard to support yourself.
None of us were born with a silver spoon in our mouths. You know,
you gotta grind for it.
You know, but having 5 people on a fire truck also kind of helps you out, you know, because you're carrying this load of stuff. I mean, now they put everything on the stretcher and they carry the stretcher in. We didn't do that day. We used to have crazy, you know, equipment that we had to carry, you know, and now with the fire department, especially now after 25 years, the guys that were EMTs, they understand a lot about the job, and they look to help out the guys that get on the scene. I've seen that, and that's good. That's great that it's growing that way. But, you know, we want ours. We want a piece of the pie. You know?
And you've been outside the kitchen for how long?
Oh, my God.
Yeah, smelling the food, but, you know, not able to be a part of the banquet. So back to communications. You prep for it. We know what's going on around the world, too. And I'll never forget Hank Millay, who worked in Rescue 1 and also later on Squad 288 at the FDNY. Very good man. He's been on the show a number of times. Mentioned that there was some sort of a training the FDNY was doing in the late 90s, where this is like 98, 99, and about terrorism, where on the flyer for the training was a bullseye, and in the background of that bullseye was the World Trade Center. I think a lot of people felt after 93 they weren't done. Back. They were coming back. I don't think anybody could have pictured what they would have done in 2001, but a lot of people thought that they were going to come back. So that morning, you're a captain. You've been involved in communications for a while, and I don't think for as much prep as you could have done, nothing could have prepared communications in the EMS division and obviously the fire department as a whole for what would come that morning. So I'll let you take it from here. Where were you? And just take me through that morning for you.
That's the wild horses that everybody has to get together, make a multi-jurisdictional command post, and everybody's contingency has to be somehow met. And once you got that started, but this is something that is like Sandy, is a once in a lifetime event. And I had been retired. They called us back in. I had my uniform, and Commissioner Gregory was nice to give me a parting radio to take home. And I said 9838 was my captain's number. I'm en route to the 1060. I got there 15 minutes after the first plane hit. And the ambulance, there was a staging and a triage area right on Vesey Street. Was it West Street? Yeah, it was West Street and Vesey, about 90 meters away from the North Tower. And they brought a woman in a brown dress that she had inhalation burns. So when I went, the guys were like, excuse me, but they were pooing in their pants. So I said, bring her on the stretcher. And I went to intubate her. She was all closed up from the fumes and stuff. Next thing we know, you hear rumbling and things hitting the top of the ambulance. and we felt it. And the front of the ambulance got hit more than the back. So I was on the captain's seat. Them two were on the side seat. And we just, as it's slow motion, the ceiling started coming down. So we all laid down. We took the oxygen, all three of us. It was vehicle 217, 213, I think. And we were passing the oxygen, and the ambulance got full of that soot. And about 2 hours later, a fireman came banging the door, and he opened it up, and we went to the R&R, which was behind the American Express building. And then after that, after I cleaned up, I went with Chief Ulysses Grant, may he rest in peace, on the pile. And I stayed there. But this was the problem. And here is where an incident command needs to bring in other jurisdictions and training. We had so many people come from all over the country that were not trained in incident command. And every time we were on the pile, me and Chief Grant, and every time you heard a creak or a crack, there was a stampede of people that ran down that. They thought another building was coming down. So I ran with them. I tripped. I rolled down the pile, lost my glasses. I fractured my ankle. And then I at that point in time, it was almost the third day, and I decided that was enough. And I went home. And I had decided at this point in my life, I had gallbladder cancer, prostate cancer. I fractured my neck with a linear fracture. So I've got all metal, but I'm still here. They can't take the shark out.
I like that. That's a line of the show right there. That's a quote of the show. They can't take the shark out. They certainly can't. And, you know,
I miss it so badly now because Mike Fields is a great guy. And I know I would have had that position should I stay.
And you were there for a very long time. And this was, and I'll ask you just
on that particular time period, 01, 02, it's personal for you. You had a lot of friends, I'm sure, in the police department, in the fire department that you knew who got killed that day. And even if you didn't know them that well, I don't know if you did or you didn't, two of yours in the EMS division were among the 343 that got killed.
Carlos Lilo worked for me, and so did Quinn. They both worked for me at Woodhull. And Quinn was hysterical, and Carlos Lilo came there. I played softball against them. The EMS had their interleague there. Great guy, two great guys. I went to a lot of funerals, and to this day, I'm on more mental health meds than ever because I constantly dream about something chasing me, and my team of therapists say it's because of the building coming down chasing you. So you've interpolated that as some type of monster coming at you in your sleep. So I just got certified for respiratory issues, but I'll be around. I always had a saying on the radio, swim silent and swim deep. When you're out there on the street, that's the best thing to do. Don't get noticed. Don't be asleep on the ambulance. Because when I was in SOD, guys, come on, go find the back of a funeral home. Go to sleep there. The guys liked me. I was very fair with them. And I never looked to hurt anybody.
Right. I could tell.
I kept the ship rolling.
You did. And I was going to say, so a couple of years, did you age out then a couple of years ago when you left in 2021? Yes. Okay. Because I'm going to say, if not for that age limit, you probably still, you would still be there. If not for that age.
I know I would be chief of EMS, and I'm trying to get up to see Tucker. I gave my resume to the mayor. I wrote a letter to the mayor. I gave my resume to Tucker. I wrote a letter to Tucker asking them, for a meeting, and all I get back is the political, referendum.
Jargon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope so. I mean, listen, that's not a good department. It's a great department, rather. It's a great department. There's a lot of great moving parts to it. And there's a lot of directions, especially now with the resources that we have available that weren't available in your day, that can really help the department. It's just a matter of figuring out how to move the department forward. So it's a big job, and EMS is certainly a part of that job. So, I do hope certainly that EMS can get its fair share and get that seat at the table, so to speak. You said it earlier. You said it best. Piece of the pie. You're not asking for the whole world. Just a piece of the pie is fine.
I would like to see the fire tour commanders come in for incident training for EMS. They probably don't even know about Sternville or, any of that. I'm sure we can open up their eyes to a lot. When you get to that level and a fire chief can say, okay, might generate this many patients. We did a pre-plan on it. Let me get the right resources for EMS down here. But if you ask any of them, Donald told me, if I went to a place where there's a lot of patients, I wouldn't know what to do.
Chief Burns said that?
Yep, to me.
Yeah.
The training was really great that Chief McCracken sent me to.
I can imagine. Thanks for mentioning Chief Burns, man. He had the South Tower on 9/11. He did a great job.
I know.
Until the end. Right up until the end.
Nigro, all those guys were good guys to me.
Yeah. Nigro, he's got an interesting place in FDNY EMS history, talking post-merger, because that first year, 96 to 97, before, of course, he moved up the ladder, eventually chief of operations, chief of department, came back as commissioner. That was his baby for a little while, 96 to 97, that first year, helping integrate things.
Oh, baby.
Yeah, it was exactly.
Think about that. They're going to put this in your lap, and they want you to make it run like a T.
And I think that was a test to see if he had what it took for greater things. And he did a good enough job in 1996.
No, Dan did a good job.
Yeah, he did. He certainly did.
His hands are tied. Because the minute Dan would say something that he needed for EMS or he wanted to do, they would chop him down. That's the bureaucratic in any type of city agency.
Yeah, especially one as large as New York. There's a question from Patrick Thom. He worked, if I'm mispronouncing that last name, Pat, I'm sorry. But to your point on the rescue medics, which the FDNY introduced not too long ago, he says, is it true that the rescue medics would be responding with the rescue companies together, or is that not the case?
No, that's not the case.
Okay, so thank you for clearing that up, because I didn't know. I mean, it's heavy training that those guys are getting. I've seen the vehicles too. Those vehicles, it's kind of the same model that the Special Operations Division back in the old days.
I was talking about ultrasound before they got it, and can I tell you something?
Go ahead.
Even peer pressure. When I was in SOD, I had a kid that was new on the job. He was on the BQE. People got into an accident. The car was on fire. They were burning alive. He was holding the door. He burnt his hands. The kid was a wreck. So I took him to Bravo ambulance. We never had a peer group or help for people that broke down. I took him in there. I sat him down. I got him something to drink. We talked for a while. I made him call his mother. And I think that's maybe the first time that we ever had a peer pressure group to help people, because what I've seen in my life, I don't even want to say on the air. I mean, it's absolutely mind-boggling what I've seen in my years.
I can imagine. And we've certainly hit on some of that tonight, and time has flown by.
When we're over, I'll send you some of those, pictures that I won't want to talk about on the job.
That's fine. And by the way, before I get to the rapid fire, I guess we can go through some of them now. We got some pictures here. We brought up Sternville earlier. We'll just go through some of the photos that you did send over. And Victor, you can pull up whichever one. That's you in front of SOD.
That was the proudest day of my life being there.
I can imagine. Let's see what else we got. There you go. Leap cost her a leg is the headline.
All right. This white helmet, was one of the first field-tested helmets before they went to the yellow. And this is a funny story. I climbed, if you look at my shirt, it's all dirty because I climbed under the train, and she had a wig on, and the wig was off to the side. So as I got to her mid-train, I said, man, I got a decap. So all of a sudden, she was in a fetal position, And she turned around to talk to me. And I said, oh, and I banged my head up against the railing. And we got her out. We couldn't save the leg, but my partner in this job, Mark Michaels, his back is to you. He had killed himself on the job, and I drove him in the ambulance to the morgue. That was Becca's orders because he was a great guy, Mark Michaels.
I remember he told me that story off the air. Yeah, very
Yeah.
sad what happened to him.
That's Mark Michaels right there, and there is Billy Gross.
I was gonna say that's Billy Gross in the helicopter because that's when Billy came on a few weeks ago. That's a picture that I got sent.
Yep.
And there's you in the foreground there.
Always patient care. In this picture, I'm a little wet because I dove into the Prospect Park Lake to get the kid out, and unfortunately, we couldn't revive him.
Sad story there. I was reading it too. Yeah, there was kind of separate accounts. The aunt said she wasn't screaming. The guys, their heart was in the right place. Unfortunately, they ended up getting hurt. So this is the Transit Police Rescue Unit, I think, that's with you guys here. They're EMRU.
We were great with them. You know, I have to say, with the police department, they would walk on their hands and head for us if they needed to. Like, this is Mark. He's holding up because I told him I needed a piece of tape this big. Mm-hmm. So he was telling one of the EMTs up there that's what we needed.
There's the EMRU guys in the background.
Now,
this is the agonies.
This is I put a book together. You could see Medic 385. That's Pee Wee Gross. And this guy was held up in his store. The bullet went through his cheek and it came out the left side. But Dr. Soltani told us, because I didn't know why we couldn't get this guy to get a heartbeat. He bled out into the supraclavicular area, which is where your clavicle is, right under it. So he lacerated his carotid artery on the left side because the bullet transected across his jaw.
Wow. He died?
Yeah, that guy died because of the loss of blood.
Yeah, I guess if it's an injury like that. That's you at Sternville, this picture right here.
Those are all lieutenants.
Is that Patty Bogan in the back?
No, but this is Mark Stone, Mike Musto, a lot of the guys I knew, but they enjoyed it. They really did.
Looks like it. I mean, it's a great model. Set up very well. More patient care here.
This is me. We don't use these anymore. They're called a venti mask. For people with COPD, if you give them too much oxygen, they'll stop breathing. It's the baroreceptors in the neck. And I was checking his IV to make sure it didn't infiltrate. But if you look how old everything is, it's like that paneling when you buy that house and you find it in the basement.
Yeah.
But
it's pretty neat, though. I like it.
This was my great partner. This was Davin McGloin. We called him Head Mo because he had the Mohegan.
He looks like Chuck Liddell.
Yeah. This kid climbed down the radio shack. He made a mistake. He thought he was going down some other pipe, but he went down the flue of the chimney. Ooh. And he got stuck down there. And the fire came. They broke through the wall. We took him out, but his fingers were like the tails of the crypt. He had only bones showing because the heat kept going on and off. We saved him. We gave him some electrolytes, dextrose, and fluids, and we saved that kid. Then he got locked up.
Is this down at Floyd Bennett?
Yes.
Okay.
People, the PD Aviation, one guy was my friend, and he would take us up anytime he wanted. Bill Gross got a lot of rides and took some great pictures. And that's Carlos Medina with me, and this is another one of the train.
Yep, that one that we just had. Is that probably the same job? Colleagues plan help for EMS workers to headline here.
I owned a bagel store in Brooklyn, and this is Don Bowen. He had a tumor in his brain, and he was going to die. And on the top of my bagel store was the Democratic quarters. So we asked them if we could use the place, and I catered a whole thing for to raise money for him.
Very nice. Very nice. Hero saved 3 from fire.
I was coming home one night, and it was the 4th of July, and it was on East 7th Street in Turner Place. And the whole roof, there was fireworks that went in, and the whole roof was on fire. So I got out of my car, I ran up, I started banging on the doors and windows, and they came out, and that house went up quick.
I'm not laughing at that. I'm laughing because I see here, and thankfully it worked out well. Dave Burns, who's our friend, he's been on the show. Dave Burns took that photo.
Chief Becker allowed Dave Burns and Charlie Wenzelberg, who were into photography, to ride with us. That's how I got so many of these articles. I got hundreds more.
And Dave's still doing it too. Now this is, I know it's tilted, so but then again, this is this your medic license?
No, this is when Mark got it mixed up. When I used to work, I had a black daytimer in my pocket that gave me phone numbers for drug addicts or geriatrics, people that would need help. One night we had a shooting in Bay Ridge on Bay 8th Street. And let's put it this way. He was the brother of the head of the Benamo family. And he was shot 3 times in the head, 3 in the chest. The family was all outside, and we had to do what they call a cosmetic job. We knew he was dead already. So we worked him up. We put him in Bay Ridge's ambulance, and we took him to the hospital. And I took my jacket off to start an IV. And we cut his suit jacket, and his book fell out. They thought it was mine. They put it in my jacket pocket. When I went back to the medic room to restock, I felt, put my jacket back on. I feel the weight. I pull it out, and I'm looking through it. It ain't mine. It's the guy's. I'm not going to say his name, but there's something that looked like a diploma. And I opened it up, and it said pay to bearer on demand, $1 million. Now, back then, all I had to do was walk into the treasury, no name, no ID, and just collect $1 million. But as I was going out, there were 2 homicide detectives, and the coordinator of the emergency room had 2 guys inside, and we heard them saying, "You want to be a big shot? We'll make you a big shot. We want all his property." So at that point, I gave it to the homicide detectives and said, "You got to deal with this." And I got employee of the year, I had lunch with Mayor Koch. And here we go. This is Steve Kerr right here, Sid right here.
Yeah.
This is
Bill Gross, I think, is the other guy.
No, it's Joe Friedman,
Okay.
Brian O'Malley, and that's me when I had long hair.
I can see you there in the background. Steve's next to you, right?
He got shot in the head because he was stealing rims off cars.
Well, that'll do it.
Somebody shot him in the head.
That will do it.
This is Chief Becker. He really looked up to me, and I looked up to him.
On the left or on the right?
He's on the left side with the white shirt.
Okay, gotcha.
This is, the older gentleman is Neil Mangrone. When I first became a lieutenant, I worked under him at Bellevue. And
Gotcha.
below is me kidding around with Mark. I was going to shock him.
Oh, boy. And this is a good one, too.
That's me when I was in Cumberland. That was a long time ago. That was back in 1978. Just
starting out, not even knowing what would be coming down the pike. And then I love this. This is old school right here. You got the trace center in the background.
I have the booklet. I have the booklet from it.
Now that's cool. That is very cool. And this one's
and that's me carrying the grandma down the ladder. And we worked her up, but you can't save everybody. Once you ingrain that in people, we always kid around that we fight the Reaper. And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose.
Yeah, unfortunately. Great pictures, great conversation. And it's funny, I'm looking at the rapid fire here, and I can only ask you 3 questions from the rapid fire because you answered 2 of them already. Most memorable MCI we covered. Hardest day you ever had in uniform. I don't think anything is going to get harder than September 11th, 2001.
Well, the hardest day that I still remember, we had a call. I don't know if it was with Mark. We had a call for a child in cardiac arrest. And she was a little blonde kid. Her mother had her in the sink pouring water on her. Unfortunately, she had a septal defect, which is a hole in the septum of the heart. And she shunted her blood over, and she went into cardiac arrest in my arms. I will never, ever forget carrying her to the ambulance.
That's a hard one. It's a very hard one. It's a lot to deal with on the EMS side, fire side, and police side. But we definitely send our best to those that day in and day out on either side of the coin. Do it, and do it. You did, my friend. Do it. You did. So we'll do the rest of the rapid fire here. And you answered, like I said, you just answered that one. So these are really just a few hit and run questions. I can't even say 5 tonight. It's more so like 2 or 3. We'll queue it up here. So in light of everything you did, what's one lesson from special operations that you feel could be implemented from your era into today's EMS?
Be second to none.
As you said earlier. Okay. Advice, well, besides being second to none, advice to young EMTs and paramedics coming up now.
Don't do the job if your heart's not in it.
Simple, to the point. And lastly, what does it mean to have served nearly 50 years in New York City EMS?
I would do it all over again with the money. Now, I'm still trying to do it. I'm going to try to make a meeting with Mr. Tucker, and I'm going to try to make with the new mayor, or if Mr. Adams gets in. I'd like to see EMS as a third service.
All right. And that is a very quick rapid fire. Thank you, Victor, for the music as always, and thank you, Mr. Stern, for your very, very good answers tonight and the great conversation overall. Stick around; we'll talk off air. But before I bid adieu to the audience tonight, if you have any shout-outs that you, my friend, would like to give, the floor is yours. Go right ahead. Anybody you want to shout out?
Oh, I would shout out there's so many things you could shout out, but I loved that job more than anything in the world. Just like the firefighter loves his job. It was everything to me. There is nothing better. I had this saying all the time. The police will protect your life. The fire department will rescue your life. But EMS is the only one that will really save your life. Now, I'm not talking about pulling a guy out of a fire. I'm talking about medical versus trauma versus anything. We have those tools, and they should make us a third service.
And we'll see what the future brings, especially with the changes that are coming up in a few months in New York City. A timely conversation because a lot is on the line these days. So this has been a great conversation, like I said. My thanks to everyone tonight who was in the audience. Great participation and give and take with all of you guys tonight. You guys are always very good with that. So I appreciate it. Coming up next on the Mike the New Haven podcast, we'll see if we have a show Monday. I had to reschedule Monday's guest. He's coming out in November instead. That was Joe Badalamante. So he'll be on November 24th, barring anything unforeseen. I'm working on getting somebody for Monday. If I don't get anybody, we won't have a show. But next Friday, which will be our first show of October, should be former Deputy Commissioner on the NYPD side, Rob Martinez, who was involved in the NYPD's fleet services. So we can talk about that when he is on next Friday. Again, that should be 6 p.m. And I'll let you guys know on social media if I find anybody for this Monday. So again, thanks to everyone who tuned in, rather you tuned in on YouTube, rather you tuned in on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter. For those of you, of course, listening on the audio side, from their 2001 album, Nice, it's the Rollins Band with Up For It. In the meantime, on behalf of producer Victor and Mitchell Stern, I am Mike Colón. This has been Volume 74, the best, the bravest, interviews with the FDNY's elite. We'll see you next time. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. And you can't take the shark out. Take care.